The county fairgrounds in Willow Creek always seemed overwhelming, with their cacophony of sounds and sticky air, a bit too expansive for someone as petite and quiet as Lily Parker. The summer sun loomed over the gravel, transforming every breath of air into a dense, radiant haze. Behind the livestock barns, the carnival rides stood in anticipation. Vendors called out enthusiastically about kettle corn and raffle tickets, while the faint sound of a hammer resonated from the main pavilion, where the day's most significant event was about to take place. Lily was 8 and she hadn't uttered a single word to another soul since last November, the day 2 officers in uniform arrived at the farmhouse, shattering her world into pieces. Her mother, Officer Hannah Parker, was gonna killed in the line of duty. The paper stated it in a way that left no room for questions or hope. After that, Lily's voice had retreated, hidden somewhere even she couldn't reach. But this morning, Lily had woken up before dawn, the familiar ache in her chest just a little sharper than usual. She went straight to the dusty mason jar she'd been filling with coins for as long as she could remember. Birthday coins, lemonade booth change. She remembered the silver dollars her mother used to slip her as a treat, counting it twice, $52 and some loose change. Cradling it in her backpack, she waited by the door. Rachel, her mother's wife, had tried to talk her out of it. "Lily, baby, you don't have to go to that auction," she said, kneeling down with those tired eyes that once sparkled. "It won't be what you want. Let's just have pancakes, please." But Lily only shook her head, her gaze fixed on the spot where Rachel's wedding ring glinted in the morning light. That ring looked wrong now, too loose on a hand that trembled. Why? Neil, Lily's stepfather, lingered in the shadows, distractedly fiddling with his phone, attempting to mask his unease. Since the funeral, he felt at a loss for how to support her, resorting to phrases like, "You've got to move on, kiddo," or "You can't simply cease to exist." At times, she felt a deep resentment towards him. Other moments, she found herself indifferent, lacking the energy to feel any animosity. They traveled in quietude. Rachel's aging Subaru clattered along the county road, each bump in the asphalt sending a tremor through Lily's arms. When they finally parked, Rachel leaned in, her voice steady. "Whatever happens, I love you. Okay?" Lily gazed down at her knees as the door slammed shut, and the scents of the fairground enveloped her: popcorn, hay, sweat, and sunburned metal. Inside the pavilion, a crowd moved about wooden benches that faced a small stage. A few police officers in sharp uniforms stood at the front, appearing uneasy. To the left, a solitary metal crate rested beneath a handmade sign that read "Retired Canine Auction Max." There he was, Max's last tangible connection to her mother. Not just a fleeting memory or a faded photograph. Max, with his coat worn at the edges and eyes dark and piercing, sat there as if he owned the world, though his tail barely stirred. His gaze swept over the crowd once before locking onto Lily, as if drawn by an unspoken bond. A shiver coursed through her. For months, she had only felt truly alive at night, sharing her secrets with Max through the fence behind the old station after everyone else had gone home. She confided in him about the pain, the longing, and how she still held onto the hope of her mother walking back through the door. Max never replied, but his silent presence was enough. Just then, a man in a crisp blue suit called for attention. "Today, dear friends, we have a delightful moment to share with you a piece of Willow Creek history. Our beloved Max, who has dedicated 5 years of service, is now seeking a new home following the passing of Officer Parker. Let's come together and show him the love he deserves, shall we?" Lily clutched her piggy bank with such intensity that the glass pressed painfully into her palms. Rachel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, but Lily recoiled. She surveyed the crowd. Most were merely curious locals, perhaps reminiscing about her mother or drawn in by the spectacle. Yet, in the front row, her gaze landed on two men who seemed out of place. Tall, silver-haired, clad in a crisp white shirt, wearing a wolfish grin. Vince Harding, the owner of Harding Security, was a name Lily recognized from billboards, always accompanied by the slogan "Safety You Can Trust." The other was rougher, his denim shirt stained, face sunburned, and lined. Jerry Bennett, a rancher from the far side of the valley, observed Max with a hunger that twisted her stomach. She attempted to avoid Vince's gaze, but his eyes kept darting in her direction, cold and assessing. Bennett, for his part, barely glanced at her, yet his jaw worked side to side as if he were grinding something out between his teeth. The auctioneer lifted the gavel. "Will you start the bidding at $500? Do I hear $500? Lily's heart raced as she felt the weight of her coins, now seeming impossibly small in her backpack. Rachel shifted behind her, a sense of unease hanging in the air. Max observed. His ears perked up as the bids commenced. A man in a ball cap shouted out 500. Vince lifted one finger. 1,000. Bennett barely hesitated. 1,500. The numbers leapt higher, voices growing louder, the air thickening with tension and expectation. Lily stepped forward just a little, the gavel hovering in the auctioneer's hand. "Any more bids?" Her voice, so long unused, rose like a ghost in her throat, but she forced herself onward, coins clinking. Her feet felt heavy, her chest tight. She raised her jar. "I want to bid," she whispered. The room fell silent for a breath. The auctioneer looked at her with a softness that hurt. "Honey, what's your bid?" Lily extended the jar, cradling it carefully in both hands. $52.16. Amidst the crowd, a harsh, mocking laugh pierced the air, and Vince wore a smirk. The auctioneer approached, cradling the jar as if it were a treasure. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, yet shook his head gently but decisively. "It's not enough." Max emitted a low, mournful whine that lingered in the rafters, tugging at something profound within each person present. Lily felt an overwhelming urge to scream, to flee, to escape the weight of their gazes as she stood there, paralyzed by her own perceived failure. Just as she turned to run, Max barked sharply, commanding silence from the crowd, and in that stillness, everything hung suspended. Lily realized she wasn't just bidding for Max, she was bidding for the last piece of her mother she could touch, the only place she could pour the words she'd lost outside. The sun kept shining, the fairground noises carried on, but inside the pavilion everything had narrowed down to a little girl, a jar of coins, and an old dog's steady gaze, both of them waiting for the world to let them belong somewhere together. The auction pavilion buzzed with uneasy whispers after Lily's failed bid, but Max didn't seem to care about the numbers or the rules. He watched her, only her, as if he could see through every silence, every invisible one she tried to hide. Max wasn't just any German shepherd, even sitting still. His presence filled the barn. He was big, his shoulders wide, with a black saddle marking across his back that faded to tan around his face. His ears stood alert, never drooping the way old dogs sometimes do. His eyes, a sharp liquid brown, held the kind of wisdom you only earn by watching everything and saying nothing. People in Willow Creek still remembered stories about Max and Officer Hannah Parker. Some nights in the local diner you could hear old-timers talking about the pair, how they could clear a block with a word, how Max once sniffed out a missing child in a blizzard, how he wouldn't leave Hannah's side, not even for a treat. He'd run into burning barns, tracked fugitives through the woods, stood between danger and his partner with the kind of loyalty most folks only dream about. But the story no one liked to talk about, the one Lily saw over and over in her dreams, was the day of Hannah's funeral. That morning the rain had come down in sheets, turning the grass around the little cemetery into a sea of mud. The coffin, draped in an American flag, stood at the edge of an open grave. Officers saluted, their faces locked in stone. Max sat next to the casket. He didn't bark, he didn't whimper. When the pastor read the last words, Max pressed his head to the flag, refusing to move. When they tried to lead him away, he braced his paws and growled a low, trembling sound of protest that shattered the composure of every adult present. In the end, they let him stay until the last cloud of earth had been patted down. Afterward, he walked home behind Lily and Rachel, step for step, as if someone had switched off the light inside him. For weeks he'd lain in the backyard, nose pressed to Hannah's old jacket. The neighbors said he was grieving. Lily understood better than anyone. He was waiting for a voice he'd never hear again. Since then Lily had only found her own voice in the secret hours after midnight. She'd sneak out to the fence behind the police station. Oh, there they kept Max since the department couldn't figure out what to do with him. She'd sit in the grass, knees tucked to her chin, and whisper into the darkness, "It still aches. I miss her as well. I long for him to return home." Max always pricked his ears, inching closer, pressing his cold nose to her palm. It was the only time Lily felt almost whole in the dark. She could pretend her mother's absence wasn't a permanent thing, just something that could be fixed if she could only find the right words. But today at the auction, everything felt wrong. Max, with his leash attached to the iron crate, appeared smaller somehow, as if the world had contracted around him. The air was overly bright, the crowd too boisterous. Even the officers seemed to carry a sense of embarrassment. The auctioneer cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "Next bid, do I hear 2,000? Vince Harding lifted his hand. 2,000, he said, his voice smooth and indifferent, as if he were haggling over a second-hand vehicle. Whispers of his name floated through the crowd. Everyone was familiar with Vince. His face appeared in local advertisements, always grinning about security systems and community collaborations. He wore a gold watch, had perfect teeth, and offered a handshake that inspired little trust. "Jerry Bennett," the rancher said, not bothering to look at Vince. He fixed his gaze on Max, then shifted to Lily, his lined face contorted in a grimace. 2,500, he growled, as if the mere thought of parting with the money caused him discomfort. Someone in the crowd murmured, "Old man Bennett doesn't even like dogs." Yet Bennett paid no attention. His gaze locked on Max, as if he perceived something that remained hidden from everyone else. Lily squeezed between Rachel and Neil, her hands clenched tight. Rachel brushed her hair out of her face, whispering, "It's not fair, baby. It should be you." Neil attempted to ease the atmosphere with an awkward joke. Perhaps Maxwell dashed off with the winning bidder, but Lily shot him a glare that silenced him instantly. In that moment, a vivid flashback flickered through Lily's mind, sharp and unwelcome. She recalled her mom and Max working together in the yard, while Hannah tossed a ball that Max would catch midair, his tail wagging. "This dog's smarter than half the force," Hannah would laugh, and a lot braver. At times, Hannah would kneel next to Lily, wrapping her arm around her and softly whispering, "Promise me something. If anything ever happens, you'll take care of Max. He's family." Lily never envisioned she'd be called to uphold that promise so quickly. At the auction, the bids soared higher and higher, while Vince leaned back, a smile on his face, exuding confidence. 3,000, he drawled, as the crowd buzzed. People understood that was real money, even for someone like Vince. Bennett didn't back down. 3,500. With a determined jaw, a young officer leaned closer, whispering to the auctioneer, who merely nodded, raising the stakes once more. It was evident that this situation transcended the mere sale of an old police dog. It carried the weight of something deeper, entwined in a web of long-buried secrets and unresolved debts. Lily observed Max intently, his gaze never straying to the bidders. It remained fixed on her, her muscles tensed, poised for a command. She yearned to break the silence with a call, yet fear held her in place. As the bidding began to wane, a vivid recollection emerged that Lily found impossible to dismiss. She recalled the evening of Hannah's final shift, the image of her mother kneeling down to embrace Max tightly before departing, softly murmuring something into his ear. In that moment, Max had nestled his head against Hannah's chest, eyes shut, as though he grasped that the entire world was on the brink of shifting. Here, amidst the fairgrounds, Max seemed to linger, anticipating a directive that only Lily could provide, if only she could summon her voice. The auctioneer beckoned for the last bids. Vince, with a chilling smile, raised his hand. 4,000. He fixed his gaze on Bennett, challenging him to ascend further. Bennett paused, the silence elongating as Lily's heart raced. Rachel tightened her grip, her expression a mix of fear and urgency. Max's tense gaze was fixed on Lily, as if he could summon her to speak, to fight, to do anything to alter what felt unavoidable. Outside, the laughter from the carnival rose above the tension, a peculiar reminder that the world continued to turn even as lives fractured and shifted within the confines of the little wooden barn. Yet Max remained steadfast, and deep down so did Lily. Beneath all the fear, pain, and silence, there existed something deeper bond that connected a girl and a dog, stronger than wealth, rules, or even death itself. A loyalty that no one in that crowd could ever truly grasp, except for the two of them. The bidding had taken on a strange, almost feverish energy, as Vince Harding sat with his arms crossed, a half-smile playing on his lips. His silver hair glimmered under the fluorescent lights. Each attempt to nudge the price higher met with a subtle flick of his hand, a gesture that suggested money held no weight for him. He didn't even glance at Max. To Vince, this was business, and business was always intertwined with personal stakes across the aisle. Jerry Bennett hunched forward, knuckles white on his knees. His clothes smelled of livestock and wood smoke, his hands rough as gravel. People in Willow Creek remembered Bennett as a hard man, a widower whose daughter Molly had made the news 2 years back, first for blowing the whistle on a big pharmaceutical company, Meridian Biotech, then for vanishing on a lonely back road no one wanted to talk about. Since then, Bennett had lived on the far edge of town, shunning most company, tending cattle and nursing old herds. Today was the first time in ages he'd come into town for anything but feed. Lily watched both men through lowered lashes, feeling something like static in their danger and secrets. Even though she hadn't spoken in nearly a year, she could read people's eyes. She saw the calculation in Vince's gaze, the sorrow and anger twined together in Bennett's. This wasn't about Max, not really. It was about something larger, and she could sense it in the grown-ups' faces, especially Rachel's, whose hand was a tense knot on Lily's shoulder. The auctioneer called out, "Do I hear 4,500? His voice had lost some of its warm edge, now tinged with impatience, as the officers near the stage exchanged nervous glances. Vince's expression remained almost unchanged as he nodded once more. 4,500, he said, not looking at Max but at Bennett, as if issuing a challenge. Bennett's jaw clenched for a moment. He seemed to wrestle with something inside himself. Finally, he rasped, 5,000. His voice rang out, tired but strong. A low ripple moved through the crowd. Even the other bidders sat back, realizing the auction was now out of their league. All eyes were on the two men, Only slick and powerful, the other worn down but stubborn, and somewhere between them, a little girl and an old dog. Rachel bent down, whispering in Lily's ear, "I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry." She seemed on the verge of tears, while Neil stood awkwardly nearby, stuffing his hands into his pockets, as if wishing to vanish. But for Lily, the world had shrunk to just Max and the two men battling for him. Fragments of overheard conversations echoed in her mind, words like Meridian, evidence, witnesses. Rachel consistently attempted to divert the conversation whenever Lily approached, yet she had gleaned enough to sense the adult's apprehension during the silence that lingered between offers. A recollection flickered in the depths of Lily's gaze. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, a stack of files before her, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. Hannah gently stroked Max's head as she spoke, whispering, "Good boy, we'll figure this out." There was always a sharpness in her voice when she spoke of Meridian Biotech, and now, as she caught sight of Vince and Bennett, a familiar unease twisted in Lily's stomach. 6,000, Vince declared, his tone icy and rehearsed, breaking the tension. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A mere nobody in Willow Creek had thrown that figure on so casually. Vince's smile never reached his eyes as he reclined, momentarily seeming to peer right through Lily, assessing her worth beyond just Max's. Bennett hesitated, glancing between Max and Lily, then at the officers who watched anxiously from the sidelines. He rubbed his thumb along his jaw, grappling with his thoughts. Lily observed him cast a fleeting look at his worn wallet before shifting his gaze to the ceiling, as if seeking assistance from an unseen source. The silence stretched on, while outside, the midway music faltered, and a child's laughter rang out, a sound so vivid and piercing it felt like a taunt against the oppressive atmosphere within. Max, on the other hand, remained still. He observed Lily, his stance unwavering yet a tremor coursing through his side. Abruptly, the crowd shifted as a woman staggered forward, her complexion ashen, and her voice quaking. "That's enough, Vince. He's not yours to take." The woman was Mrs. Moreno, the school librarian, who had been well acquainted with Hannah. Vince shot her a glare that caused her to recoil, but the disruption allowed Bennett a moment to regain his composure. 6,500, Bennett finally declared, his voice gravelly yet resolute. Vince's lips twisted into a sneer. 77,000, he countered without missing a beat. The auctioneer cleared his throat, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. "This is a highly unusual, folks. But do I hear 7,500? It felt like the entire room was suspended in time, with even the distant carnival sounds outside falling silent. In that fleeting moment, the only sound that pierced the stillness was Max's calm, rhythmic breathing. Bennett's gaze locked onto Lily's, an unvoiced inquiry lingering between them, almost a silent plea. Lily's heart raced with such intensity that she felt certain the entire world could hear its frantic rhythm. Vince pulled out his phone, glancing at a message before whispering something to a man in a dark suit who had been standing at the edge of the crowd unseen. The man, broad-shouldered and wearing expensive sunglasses with an earpiece, nodded almost imperceptibly. A chill crawled up Lily's arms. She didn't know everything, but she understood this much. Vince wasn't bidding for Max out of kindness. There was something Max had, something tied to Hannah, maybe even to the secret Rachel and Neil sometimes fought about late at night. Bennett squared his shoulders. His voice was quieter now, but it rang with conviction. 8,000, that's the total I have. Vince's eyes narrowed as he considered his choices. His jaw ticked in silent frustration. For the first time, his certainty wavered. He glanced at the officers, then at the man with the earpiece, and finally at Max. Just for a fleeting moment, the crowd buzzed, whispers circulating about how the auction had transformed into a struggle over more than just a dog. The tension hung in the air, palpable and heavy, reminiscent of the stillness before a summer storm. Lily stood perfectly still, her breath shallow. Max's gaze locked with hers, his ears flicking forward, his chest rising and falling with anticipation, as if waiting for a command he knew would never come in that moment. Lily grasped a profound truth. Both men desired Max, yet for starkly different motives. Vince sought dominion, while Bennett craved authenticity. And there, caught in the crossfire, was Max himself, merely a dog, yet pivotal to something far greater, perhaps even a semblance of justice for those silenced. The auctioneer inhaled unsteadily, hammer poised, calling out 8,000. Any further bids? His gaze flitted between Vince, Bennett, the quiet girl, and the unmoving old dog. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath, and Lily felt her heart race, recognizing that this day would irrevocably alter everything, regardless of the outcome. The palpable tension in the auction barn resembled a tempest trapped beneath the roof. No wind, no rain, just an electric charge surging through everyone present. $8,000, the sound reverberated, bouncing off the beams, creating a palpable tension that hung like a challenge between Vince Harding and Gerald Bennett. The auctioneer paused, casting a glance at the officers, as though seeking their direction. Vince's jaw clenched, leaned in to whisper sharply into his phone, every eye in the barn fixed on him. Bennett appeared almost relieved, though not entirely at ease, his entire body a taut line of determination, as if prepared to confront anyone who might challenge him for Max. But just before the auctioneer could bring the gavel down, Vince raised his hand one final time. 10,000, he said, his voice flat, the words ringing like a slap. The crowd gasped. A woman in the back, someone's grandmother, let out a nervous laugh, the sound brittle and too loud. Bennett sagged, all the fight seeming to bleed out of his shoulders. The crowd hummed with anticipation. a current of murmurs weaving through the rows of benches. Rachel's arm tightened around Lily's shoulder, drawing her in, but Lily barely registered the gesture. Her entire being felt numb and detached, as if she were observing the scene from a great distance. A silence enveloped the room. The auctioneer cleared his throat, announcing, 10,000 going once. The gavel hovered midair when Lily took a step forward, her feet heavy against the worn wooden floor, the jar of coins quaking in her grip. Her heart raced so fiercely she feared it might burst. She reached the front just as the auctioneer began to dismiss her, and with a trembling voice, she uttered, "Please." The utterance was scarcely audible, yet it commanded attention, causing heads to pivot. "I want to bid. Please let me try," she said, her voice trembling. Her face flushed as she opened her hands, the piggy bank catching the sunlight and sparkling like something enchanting, something revered. The auctioneer's face softened, old lines deepening around his eyes as he knelt in front of her, careful and gentle. "What's your name, sweetheart?" His tone was so gentle it nearly shattered her composure. She replied, her voice quivering yet resolute. He nodded. "And what's your bid?" She raised the jar, her shoulders squared. $52.16. A moment of complete silence followed. Even Vince appeared taken aback. Then it blinked, as if perceiving her anew. The entire barn seemed to lean in, anticipating what would unfold next. The auctioneer's gaze became distant, his eyes shimmering with a glassy sheen. I'm sorry, honey. I wish I could," he stammered, glancing over at the uniformed officers, seeking assistance. One of them, Officer Grant, shifted awkwardly and silently expressed, "Rules are rules." Another whispered, "She's just a child." Rachel rushed ahead, gently guiding Lily away. "You did your best, sweetheart," she murmured. Lily's hands trembled, yet she held back tears, feeling an emptiness within her, as if she had been stripped bare. But Max. Max was not finished. The old dog, who had observed the entire scene in perfect stillness, suddenly tensed. A low rumble emanated from his chest, deep, steady, unmistakable. Then, without warning, Max urged forward. The leash snapped taut, jerking the crate against the plywood with a heavy bang. Startled, one of the officers fumbled with the latch, and in that split second, Max broke free. A ripple of shock coursed through the crowd as Max bounded off the stage, his massive paws thudding on the floor. The space seemed to part around him like water. Vince's security man made a move, but Bennett's shout, "Let him go," halted him. Lily's breath caught as Max charged toward her, skidding to a halt right at her feet. The barn seemed to freeze, everyone watching, no one daring to move or speak. Max pressed his head firmly into Lily's chest, and she dropped to her knees, burying her hands in his fur, feeling the warmth and the steady, thunderous beat of his heart against her own. For a long moment, the world went silent, not the nervous, restless silence of before, but a true hush, reverent and unbroken. People looked away, embarrassed by the intimacy of the moment, as if they had stumbled into someone's private prayer. Rachel gasped as the auctioneer let his gavel fall to his side. Forgotten, Neil stood near the backs, feeling something shift inside him. A door. He held his breath as he observed Lily's cheeks glisten with unshed tears, her face buried in Max's neck. A wave of shame washed over him as he recognized the depth of Lily's loss, something he had never truly grasped. In his attempts to break the silence, he offered advice, distractions, and rules, yet what she truly needed was right there, steadfast and unwavering. Bennett moved closer, the sound of his boots echoing on the floor. He glanced at Vince, whose expression was unreadable, fingers tapping out a furious beat on his phone. "Let the girl have the dog," Bennett said, his voice gentle yet resonant, ensuring every ear in the barn caught his words. "She needs him more than any of us." Vince scoffed. "This is absurd. This is a legal auction. That dog is property of the department." Bennett interrupted, his voice rising, the sharp edge of grief cutting through. "That dog is all she's got left of her mother, and you know it. This isn't about money or policy. Are you really getting your way, Harding? It's about what is just." Soft whispers of consensus flowed among the gathering. Officer Grant glanced at the police chief, who fidgeted but remained silent. Vince narrowed his eyes, his lips curling. Rules are rules. Jerry, if you wish to make a difference, consider penning a letter to the governor. Yet, his words felt empty, diminished by the gravity surrounding them. Lily glanced up, meeting Bennett's gaze. In that moment, she recognized not merely a weathered rancher, but a man burdened by a distinct sorrow. He offered her the slightest nod, a silent vow of understanding. The auctioneer paused, then gradually brought the gavel down. "Let's take a short break, folks," he said, his voice strained. "We'll sort this out." As the crowd spilled outside, murmurs of speculation and subdued anger filled the air. Lily remained on her knees in the sawdust with Max's head resting heavily on her lap. She gently stroked his ears, her eyes dry yet burning. In that moment, the world felt small once more. Just a girl and her dog at the heart of a tempest, clinging to one another as the chaos swirled around them. Neither of them knew what would come next. But for the first time in months, Lily felt the faintest flicker of hope. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, promising a storm, but inside, something else was breaking, something older and harder than the weather. A silence, yes, but one now filled with truth and the promise that sometimes the heart speaks louder than any rule. As the break was called, the barn doors swung open, and the humid afternoon spilled in, stirring up the dust and sweat that had settled like a second skin on every bystander. People streamed outside in small clusters, buzzing with gossip, nerves, and the aftershock of witnessing a little girl break through a wall that grown men couldn't breach. Lily remained on her knees in the sawdust, her hands immersed in Max's thick fur. Her universe had contracted to the warmth of his body, the rhythm of his breath steady, grounded eleva surrounding her. Everything else blurred and faded, the sound of shuffling boots becoming distant. Rachel's anxious looks. The auctioneers murmured with the officers for a long moment, and no one dared to disrupt the tension. Neil lingered just behind, a hand resting on the barn door, caught between the urge to flee and the desire to step forward. The atmosphere felt as if it could stretch on indefinitely, but it shattered with a shout from outside, a harsh, angry sound that reverberated across the fairground. Bennett, his face obscured in shadow, turned toward the source. Vince Harding's expression twisted as if he'd tasted something foul, and he stormed out, phone pressed tightly to his ear, his security detail trailing behind him. Rachel knelt beside Lily, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, we need to go. We've done what we could. Let's just go home." Her words were heavy with resignation, but Lily remained silent, shaking her head vigorously, clinging to Max as if he were her lifeline. Just then, an electric tension filled the barn. Max lifted his head, ears perked, eyes fixed on the crowd at the door, the fur along his neck bristling. People parted as Vince strode back in, his voice booming enough for all to hear. "The department can't just hand him over to some kid. I'll see to it myself." He approached the auctioneer, speaking in sharp, urgent tones. Bennett intercepted him, blocking his path with a broad shoulder. "You lost." Vince released his grip. His eyes sparkled with intensity. "You have no idea what you're stepping into, old man. That dog isn't just a stray, he's proof." Bennett's voice dropped growly. "Then maybe you're the one with something to hide." Their exchange hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Meanwhile, in the barn, Lily felt the tension thicken again, as if the world were pressing in on her from all sides. Max pressed closer, tail low, muscles taut. Suddenly Max broke from her grip, not running, not wild, but with a sense of purpose. He moved through the crowd, weaving between legs until he reached the center aisle. The crowd parted. Instinctively a hush fell as Max walked toward Vince, stopped, and stared up at him, hackles raised. Vince froze, the color draining from his face. Max's gaze felt surgical, sharp, searching, accusing. Rachel pulled Lily up. "Come on, honey, let's get outside." But before they could reach the door, Max turned nose to the ground and trotted straight back to Lily. He sat in front of her, lifting his paw and placing it gently on her Chew. The meaning was clear to everyone. Max had chosen something. Shifted in the crowd, a current invisible but powerful. For the first time the auctioneer looked uncertain, scanning the faces of the officers for guidance. Officer Grant stepped forward, clearing his throat. We all saw what happened. The department policy says highest bidder, but maybe it's time we listen to what the dog wants. Vince chuckled, a sound sharp and strained. That's not the way the law. Our test dogs don't have a say in the matter. Money speaks volumes. Bennett acknowledged the importance of rules, yet he shook his head as he stepped closer, forcing Vince to look up at him. Sometimes, he said, rules are wrong. Sometimes the right thing is obvious, regardless of what the paperwork states. Rachel's voice, trembling yet resolute, broke the silence. Lee's lost her mother, her voice, and her peace. Max, 'tis all she has left. If you take him from her, what does that make us? A soft murmur began, gradually swelling in volume, emanating from the crowd. Those who had gathered for a spectacle, a bargain, or merely a distraction now found themselves enveloped in something far more profound, the shared potential of collective righteousness. Neil finally stepped forward, finding a voice he didn't know he had. This isn't about money or who's got the most power. I think everyone here can see that. He looked at Lily, then Max, his eyes softening. Maybe it's time to stop hiding behind rules and start standing up for what's right. The auctioneer looked around and for the first time found no objection. Raised the gavel, paused, then set it down gently on the table. Let's settle this, he said. No more bids. We take a vote right here, right now. All in favor of letting Max stay with Lily? Raise your hand. Hands shot up, first tentatively, then all over the barn. Even the officers joined in. Vince and his man were the only ones who stayed still, arms folded, faces hard. Bennett smiled, a rare and honest thing. He looked down at Lily. He belongs with you, he said quietly. Then to the auctioneer, I withdraw my bid. A ripple of applause broke out, soft but growing. The barn filled with a rare warmth, hope, relief, the sense that for once the right thing had won out. Vince glared at the crowd, his control slipping. You're all making a mistake, he spat. This isn't over. Then he stormed out, his security man trailing behind. Lily, still gripping Max's fur, looked up at Rachel, at Bennett, at Neil, at the community she'd almost forgotten she was a part of. For the first time in months, a tiny smile cracked her silence. Outside, the sky had shifted, clouds moving in, the hint of rain on the wind. The world felt fragile, new, as if something had been set right but could easily be undone. But for now, at least, Max was hers. The crowd dispersed, whispers trailing in their wake, leaving Lily and her small family standing together in the fading afternoon. As they started toward the parking lot, Max at her side, Bennett locked eyes with Rachel. Keep him close, he advised. There are people who will want to take him for reasons that have nothing to do with love. Rachel nodded, a flicker of worry hidden beneath her gratitude. Neil placed a hand on Lily's back. You did good, kid, he murmured. Lily glanced at Max, his eyes bright, ears perked, tail wagging gently. She bent down, pressing her forehead to his, and for the first time in a year, she felt a word stirring in her chest. Not yet, but soon. They stepped out into the deepening dusk, the crowd's voices fading behind them. Max paced beside Lily, a constant presence woven into her very being. The first drops of rain fell softly, clean and full of promise. Somewhere in the distance, a new danger stirred, but tonight, hope felt weightier than fear. The rain that had loomed all afternoon finally unleashed itself as Lily and her family departed the barn. Fat drops splattered against the gravel, transforming dust into mud and streaking the windows of Rachel's weary Subaru. Yet, Lily hardly noticed, her hand clutched tightly to Max's collar, the dog's sturdy frame pressed against her leg, grounding her to the earth. They moved as one, with Rachel feeling both nervous and proud. Neil was oddly subdued, as though the day's occurrences had stirred something within him, while Max remained the watchful protector, his fur already damp, yet his eyes gleamed with determination as they traversed the parking lot. People called after them, offering soft congratulations and words of encouragement. A gentle blessings to Lily from Mrs. Moreno. For a fleeting instant, the town seemed more intimate, more compassionate. as if it were extending its arms to embrace a girl and her dog, preventing them from stumbling once more. Then they tumbled into the car. Max settled into the back seat, his gaze fixed on Lily, his head nestled between the front seats. Rachel turned the key in the ignition. Glancing in the mirror, her voice soft yet quivering. "You okay, honey?" Lily nodded. Her voice caught in her throat as she observed the raindrops racing down the glass. The outside world melted into a haze of gray and green. For the first time since her mother's passing, she placed her hand gently on Max's head. The silence within her felt lighter. The drive home was still. Neil gazed out the window, his jaw moving rhythmically. Rachel stole glances at Lily, her worry lines easing just a touch. Max shifted in the back, releasing a long sigh that echoed the burden of countless lonely nights as they turned onto their gravel road. Bennett's pickup trailed behind as the old rancher insisted on escorting them, just in case. At the mailbox, he pulled up alongside and rolled down his window. Raindrops pelted his hat, yet he remained unfazed. "Listen," he shouted, his voice drowned by the tempest. "I meant what I said. Watch yourselves, Vince. Harding doesn't give up easily." Rachel expressed her gratitude to him. Her gratitude was laced with a hint of apprehension. Bennett nodded and then drove away, his headlights gradually disappearing into the twilight. Inside the house, the atmosphere felt altered. Max wandered through each room, sniffing every nook as if he were rediscovering the world he had once known. He paused at Hannah's worn armchair, his nose pressed against the faded fabric, releasing a sound that was a blend of a sigh and a whimper. Lily observed him, her heart aching yet softened, less jagged than before. Neil lingered in the kitchen, pouring a cup of coffee he had no intention of drinking. Rachel busied herself with towels and dry clothes, but Lily paid no mind, choosing instead to follow Max as he made his rounds. When he finally settled at her feet, she knelt beside him, burying her face in his neck. Later that evening, Bennett arrived at their door, drenched but resolute, carrying a battered cardboard box and an air of unresolved matters. "I need a word," he said to Rachel, casting a glance at Neil. "All of you." They assembled in the living room, with Max sitting upright between Lily and Rachel. Bennett placed the box on the coffee table and opened the lid. Inside were old folders, newspaper clippings, and a small black notebook. He turned to Rachel first. You know Hannah was investigating Meridian Biotech before she died, right?" Rachel nodded slowly as she shared some thoughts with me. She pondered the unsettling nature of the contracts the county had signed and the chemical spills, the elusive evidence. Max was aiding her in uncovering the truth. Bennett's gaze softened as he recalled Molly, who had become entangled in it all, bravely blowing the whistle before disappearing without a trace. He believed it was linked to Vince and his associates, and suspected Max held more knowledge than they realized. Neil frowned, dismissing the notion. Bennett shot him a disapproving glance. "He's not just a dog. He's trained to detect chemical compounds. Hannah used to test him with vials from those spill sites, and I've witnessed his reactions, just like at the auction when Vince entered. Max remembers, perhaps even better than we do." Rachel's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Do you think Vince wants to destroy evidence?" "Max is the evidence," Bennett nodded. "Vince isn't pursuing Max out of any emotional attachment. He's intent on eliminating what Hannah discovered before her death, and he's willing to inflict pain on others to achieve his goals." A heavy silence settled in. Lily gazed at Max, her heart racing with fear, yet she found solace in the steadfast strength reflected in the old dog's ice and unwavering loyalty that had seen him through fire, flood, and loss. Bennett passed Lily the notebook filled with Hannah's meticulous notes, codes, dates, contacts. "She trusted Max, and now I think she trusts you." Lily ran her fingers over the cracked cover, feeling the weight of Hannah's handwriting as it marched across the pagestite, controlled. Sometimes frantic notes detailing strange vehicles, chemicals, and clandestine meetings. Neil cleared his throat, a wave of shame washing over him. "I should have listened more. I thought she was chasing ghosts." Rachel placed a hand on his arm. We all did. But that's no longer the case. Max settled down, resting his head in Lily's lap, conveying a silent message of unity. That night, thunder rattled the house while rain pounded on the roof and windows. Outside, the world was a tempest. Lily sat cross-legged on her bed, with Max sprawled beside her, the notebook open between them. She traced her mother's words, her mouth moving silently, lips forming names, dates, and clues. A new resolve began to take root within her, a small, stubborn hope she hadn't felt in months. Max would protect her, and together, perhaps they could complete what Hannah had started downstairs. Nell and Rachel exchanged quiet words, their argument no longer frightening Lily. For the first time, she held a secret worth cherishing, a purpose that compelled her to speak. As the storm howled outside, Lily leaned closer to Max, her voice a mere whisper. "We'll do it, boy. We'll uncover the truth, I promise." Max nuzzled her, eyelids drooping, content outside. Lightning split the sky, but inside, for the first time, Lily felt almost safe. Tomorrow would bring new dangers. She could feel it lurking at the edge of sleep. But tonight, the silence in her heart was not emptiness, but gathering strength. The storm didn't let up all night. Wind battered the windows, and rain drummed steady as a pulse on the roof. Yet inside the Parker house, the world felt still. For the first time in months, Lily stayed awake with Max, the battered black notebook between them. Sometimes she read in silence, other times she let her fingers drift over her mother's neat, urgent handwriting. Dates, addresses, names, and small symbols that resembled a code. Max observed her every action, as if anticipating the moment she would discover the thread that would weave the entire narrative together in the early morning. As the gray light slowly spread over the hills, Rachel prepared coffee in the kitchen while Neil sat at the table, his hands cradling his mug, eyes weary from sleeplessness. Bennett arrived just after dawn, his pickup truck rumbling into the driveway, headlights piercing through the rain. He brought news that sent tremors through Rachel's hands and prompted Neil to mutter curses under his breath. There had been activity at the old Meridian warehouse. Bennett spoke in a hushed tone as Vince's men busily loaded boxes, toiling in the storm as if they were desperate to conceal something before anyone could catch a glimpse. He placed his hat on the counter, his hair slicked against his forehead. "I reached out to an old friend on the county council. He informed me that Vince's security team is in full damage control, shredding records and removing anything that isn't secured." Rachel glanced at Lily, fear etched on her face. "They are aware we have Max. They could come for him." Bennett nodded with a somber expression. "That's why I'm here. I believe it's time for you all to hear the full story." They convened at the kitchen table. Max reclined at Lily's feet, his tail gently thumping whenever her hand brushed against his fur. Bennett laid out the notebook, newspaper clippings, and old photographs. He detailed how Hannah had toiled late into the night during her final weeks, tracing a path of chemical shipments and fraudulent invoices. These records indicated not just Meridian Biotech but also kickbacks to city officials. He presented them with faded images of barrels hidden in the woods. Max exploring the scent trail along the fence line, Hannah's constrained grin next to him. Neil's eyes widened. "You're telling me all those late nights she was onto something real?" Bennett nodded. "She found proof that Meridian dumped chemicals on county land, then bribed officials to cover it up. That's so? What got Molly killed? That's what Vince is so desperate to hide." Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth, tears gathering. "Why didn't she tell me? She was protecting you?" Bennett spoke gently, revealing that she had recorded everything in code, just in case. Lily ran her fingers along the columns of symbols, recognizing the familiar patterns her mother had used. A small triangle marked a meeting, a star indicated something perilous, circles surrounded names she held suspicion for. She turned the page and found a list of dates and times. At the top, her mother had written, "Max knows, trust Max." Suddenly, Max lifted his head, his nose twitching as he padded to the back door, pawing at it with urgency. Bennett followed, shotgun slung over his shoulder. Let's see what he's after. Outside, the rain had faded to a fine mist. Max trotted along the edge of the yard, his nose to the ground, then veered toward the stand of old pines behind the barn. Lily, Rachel, and Neil followed, their boots squelching in the damp grass as they made their way toward the trees. Max halted and started to dig with fierce determination, dirt flying everywhere. Lily knelt beside him, helping to pull up wet roots and mud until, at last, her hand struck something solid. She unearthed a rusted tin lunchbox, heavy and securely locked. Bennett used his pocket knife to pry it open. Inside were 3 vials, each marked with a number and a date on masking tape. The contents appeared to be water, but Max recoiled, his nose wrinkling in distaste. Bennett lifted one vial, frowning. "This is what Hannah was after," he said. "She told me Max could smell the difference at chemicals Meridian dumped. These are the samples she hid, evidence no one else ever found." Rachel exhaled unsteadily. "Do we take them to the police?" Bennett shook his head. "Not just yet. Vince has too many connections at the station. If we hand this over now, it will vanish for good." He cast a quick look at Lily, then at Max. "Now we have what we need. If we can get this to the council or the press, somewhere public, they can't cover it up." Neil paced, tension evident in his shoulders. "What about us? Vince won't just let this go." Bennett nodded, a grim expression on his face. "We'll have to move fast. Keep Max close and stay alert. If Vince or his men show up, you get out. No heroics." Rachel gazed at Lily, her voice quivering. "Honey, are you scared?" Lily shook her head, her hand resting on Max's back. She felt the old dog's steady breath and sought to draw his courage within herself. Together, they packed a small bag containing the evidence notebook and Rachel's camera. Bennett made phone calls swiftly and urgently, whispering into the receiver about safe places and trusted friends. Neil discovered his old baseball bat and meticulously inspected the locks on each window. The day dragged on with a heavy tension, each arm stretching painfully. Max stayed close to Lily, flinching at the sound of every passing truck. When a black SUV crept down the road, stopping briefly for someone inside to snap photos, Neil hurriedly closed the blinds, cursing under his breath. That evening, as they gathered around the kitchen table for a tense, cold dinner, Bennett spoke softly. "Tomorrow we'll go to the council and make it public. They can't ignore us if we do it openly." Lily nodded, swallowing her fear, reaching for Max, and feeling a flicker of hope amidst the anxiety sense that, for the first time, perhaps the truth would finally have a chance to breathe. Later, in her room, she sat with a notebook, reading her mother's last entry by flashlight. The words were shaky, as if Hannah had written in haste. "If you're reading this, trust Max. He'll show you what matters. Find the truth. Don't let them scare you. Love you, baby girl." Lily's chest ached, yet she smiled through her tears, pressing her face into Max's fur. He licked her cheek, his warmth chasing the cold from her bones. She fell asleep clutching the notebook. Max curled around her, both of them bracing for the fight ahead. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The world felt new, still dangerous, but with the first real hint of dawn. Dawn arrived, pale and anxious, the sky still echoing from last night's tempest. Lily woke to the low grumble of Max by her side, and the distant sounds of Rachel's and Bennett's voices drifting up from the kitchen. She dressed quietly, slipping on her old worn sneakers, smutty, with one lace broken, and nodded. She checked that Hannah's notebook was zipped tight in her backpack, along with the vials wrapped in socks. Max stretched, his nose pressed to her hand, tail wagging once as if to remind her that we're not alone downstairs. Rachel leaned over the table, pouring coffee for Bennett and herself, her hands trembling slightly. Neil stood off to the side, arms folded, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. The tension between him and Rachel felt thick and brittle. Too much had gone unsaid for too long. Lily hovered by the doorway, watching as Bennett mapped out a plan on a notepad. We take it all to the town council meeting this afternoon. We go in as a family. Let them see our faces, force it public. His voice was gravelly but determined. We can't risk a private meeting. If we disappear, so does the evidence. Rachel nodded, her voice barely a whisper. What if they try to stop us? Bennett's eyes flashed with an old kind of stubbornness. Let them try. Neil's jaw worked, his fists clenching and unclenching. For days now he had been an outsider in this fight, watching Rachel and Bennett band together while he struggled to rationalize, to control, to move on. But the rules he had trusted, law, order, logic, no longer fit the world they were living in. Something within him was starting to crack. It occurred shortly after breakfast. A knock echoed at the front door, 3 precise raps, too intentional to be welcoming. Max tensed, shifting between Lily and the door. His hackles raised a low growl rumbling in his chest. Neil moved first, extending his hand for silence. Rachel's hand trembled as she reached for her phone, poised to dial 911. But when Neil peered through the curtain, his face went pale. Outside stood Vince Harding, slick as ever in a pressed suit, flanked by his silent security man. Vince's smile was hollow, failing to illuminate his eyes. He waved at the window, a gesture tinged with mockery. Rachel pulled Lily back, but Neil stood firm, squared his shoulders, and cracked the door open just a bit. What is it that you desire? Vince's tone was smooth, almost inviting. I just want to have a conversation. Neil had no trouble. He glanced past him into the house, his gaze lingering on Max and Lily. A beautiful dog, he remarked. I hear he's quite the hero. Neil stood in the doorway, urging, go ahead, say what you need to say. Vince sighed, assessing Neil from head to toe. Let's not pretend you're unaware of the situation. You've entangled yourself in something far beyond your comprehension. This mission of yours, your wife, the rancher, the kid, it's all set to destroy you, but it doesn't have to be that way. Neil stiffened. Are you threatening my family? Vince chuckled softly. Not at all. I'm presenting you with an opportunity. He lowered his voice, leaning closer. Hand over what you have at vials, the notebook, even the dog if necessary, and in return, nothing will happen. You and Rachel can start fresh. A new job, a new town. All of this chaos will vanish. Neil's fingers pressed into the door as he cast a glance back at Rachel, her expression tight with anger, while Lily held Max, her eyes wide with disbelief. A shift occurred within him, as old guilt and shame surged forth, recalling all the times he had urged Lily to let go and the countless ways he had failed her. He pondered her sorrow in solitude, reflecting on Hannah and the void she had created in her absence, and the unspoken vow, firm yet quiet, that he would always look after Lily, come what may. No, Neil said quietly. You can't buy us off. Not now. Vince's face hardened. He said, you think this is a choice? You think you're the first to try standing up to me? He stepped forward, his voice steady. You'll regret this, he dropped, but Neil didn't flinch. Get off my porch, Vince, before I take matters into my own hands and contact the sheriff. Vince held his gaze a moment longer, displayed that icy grin once more, and walked confidently back to his vehicle, the security. A man lingered at Walt, assessing Neil from head to toe before he turned and followed the SUV as it rolled away. As the gravel crunched beneath her feet, Rachel released a shaky breath, realizing he wasn't going to stop. Neil looked at her, something raw in his eyes. I know, and I should have thought you trusted Hannah. I was frightened. I wished for things to return to how they used to be. He gazed at Lily. My voice falters, and I apologize, kiddo. I should have done a better job of protecting you, Bennett. He nodded, affirming our commitment to unity from this point forward. No more secrets. Neil nodded in agreement, yet there was something else was stirring within him, a determination blossoming as he vanished into the den, emerging a few minutes later with a battered folder, yellowed with age. He set it on the table. I kept these after Hannah passed away, and I came across emails, phone records, and other items while attempting to organize her belongings. At the time, I didn't fully grasp it all. But I believe at this moment he rummaged through the folder, his hands trembling, and extracted. Multiple pages display conversations involving Vince, Meridian executives, and a portion of the city council. There's even a record of payments if, as we descend, they all follow suit. Rachel clutched the papers, her eyes glistening with tears. Neil, this is everything. Lily gazed at her stepfather, this man she had resented, misunderstood, tried to ignore. She perceived him now as something different, a man who was finally taking action, not out of courage but due to necessity. Fearful of losing the scant family he had remaining, Bennett leaned in and said, "We have what? We require everything. We deliver directly to the council without any deviations. We ensure our message is heard clearly. Let's make it public so Vince can't interfere with us." Max appeared to grasp the situation as he nuzzled Lily. The tail thumped, carrying the weight of hope that thickened in the air that afternoon as clouds rolled back and the sunlight bathed the porch in warmth as they carefully loaded the evidence into Rachel's tote bag, vials, a notebook, files, and a camera, all meticulously organized by Bennett. Referred to the local paper as a reliable companion, urging to gather at the town hall with a recorder in hand, while Lily embraced Max warmly. Feeling the rhythm of his heart against hers, she gazed at Neil, who placed a hand on her shoulder, awkward yet genuine. She nodded, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to lean into his side as they climbed into the car together, Max's head in Lily's lap, Rachel's hand rested over Neil Bennett's, his gruff reassurance filling the air as the car wound through Willow Creek. The town appeared transformed, yes, but also bolder, as if it too, weary of hidden truths. The council building loomed over the square, and remarkable yet imposing, and remarkable yet bearing the weight of all that truly mattered. Lily squeezed. Max felt her fingers gently glide over his scarred fur. "Almost there, boy," she whispered. In a hushed tone, Max lifted his gaze to meet her eyes, which sparkled in that fleeting moment. Lily sensed it deeply, the bond, the assurance, the straightforward and unwavering reality that at times love exists. The most resounding expression of bravery. The atmosphere within the Willow Creek Town Council building was heavy with an eager tension hung in the air, a palpable quiet that appeared to collect in the shadows and flow through the fissures of the aged timber. Attendees had already started to gather, populating the rows of metal folding chairs that faced the dais. Some were enticed by murmurs of intrigue, while others clung to an unwavering belief that the truth would ultimately emerge. In the early light, the journalist positioned a camera at the rear, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone into his. The local paper's photographer captured images of the crowd, lingering for a moment on Lily and Max. Rachel, Neil, Lily, Bennett, and Max sat near the front, the notebook and tote bag of evidence tucked securely between Rachel's belongings. Bennett's battered cowboy hat rested on his knee, his knuckles pale as they gripped its brim. Neil stole glances at the door. With a face marked by tension yet filled with resolve, Rachel grasped Lily's hand tightly, and in response, Lily returned the gesture. Meanwhile, Max's head rested gently on her knee as she could feel his heartbeat, steady and grounding, keeping her own fears from boiling over as the council members filed in. Among 5 individuals, some known and some unfamiliar, was Councilwoman Linda Myers, an old acquaintance of Hannah's, along with 2 individuals whose names Lily only recognized from campaign signs, had faces that appeared tired and uncertain. Councilman White called the meeting to order, his gavel cracking like thunder. "We have new business," he announced. Presented to the council, he spoke with a formal yet trembling voice, delivering a petition concerning the fate of K9 Max and issues of public concern tied to Meridian Biotech. "Mrs. Parker, if you and your family wishes to speak to the council." Rachel stood, her voice trembling at first, then gaining strength as she My wife, Officer Hannah Parker, lost her life while investigating Meridian Biotech. Suspected that unlawful activities were taking place, so she meticulously maintained records, notes, and evidence. My family and I are here to request two things. First, that Max be permitted to remain with our daughter as her therapy dog, and additionally, that the council conduct a public review of this evidence and hold Meridian accountable, and anyone connected to them held responsible. Bennett rose next, his voice gravelly as gravel. My daughter passed away while attempting to reveal the truth. This dog, he nodded to Max, assisted both these women. He can detect those chemicals Meridian discarded. He's the living proof, and if you allow Vince Harding or those are on him, you're involved. Neil expressed his thoughts modestly, but clearly, I believed that rules were meant to safeguard us. I was mistaken at times. Guidelines are employed to maintain silence. I have provided emails, phone records, and payment details. Documentation is crucial. Overlooking this means you're aiding in the concealment. A wave has shifted. Across the room, the mayor leaned in, sharing a charged look with Councilman White and Councilwoman Myers. Expressed with deep feeling, he inquired, "Is there anyone else who would like to share their testimony?" A counselor from Lily's school stood up, clearing her throat. Since Officer Parker's death, Lily hasn't. She hasn't spoken to anyone. Her only communication is with Max. Taking him away would cause irreparable harm. She needs him, not merely as a companion but as a vital connection. Vince Harding held on until the very end. Strolled to the front, a flawless smile rehearsed. "I feel for the Parkers and Mr. Bennett, but let's clarify that departmental policy states retired canines so far. The department's property and children cannot hold legal ownership. My security firm presented a substantial offer for Max by the book addresses these so-called allegations, emphasizing that Meridian is an essential partner in this community. Despite the wild claims he dismissed towards Bennett, dismissive attitudes are merely a blend of conspiracy and sorrow that we all share. We've already lost Officer Parker. We shouldn't exacerbate that loss with witch hunts." The atmosphere in the room became tense as Bennett sprang to his feet. "Do not even think about discussing my Molly or Hannah as if they are mere incidents. You attempted to purchase your escape, Vince. You have failed." Councilman White demanded order, striking the gavel once more. "Enough of this. The evidence will be examined as the next hour unfolds." In slow, breathless moments, the council members scrutinized Hannah's notebook, the vials, and the records. A journalist from the local newspaper snapped pictures while firing off questions in a hushed, rapid manner as Councilwoman Myers spoke. "Read aloud the entries from the notebook. Max understands trust. Rely on Max if anything occurs. Track the finances." Bennett compiled a dossier of his personal autopsy reports. Captures a sequence of calls that linked the events surrounding Molly's death, Hannah's inquiry, and Vince's late involvement. During the evening gatherings at Meridian, Neil included phone records that revealed Vince's communications with council members regarding night's tea. Evidence vanished as Vince confronted the situation, struggling to maintain his calm. "You can't demonstrate any of this. These are merely notes and conjecture." Bennett interrupted him. "If you've got nothing to conceal, so why the effort to part ways with the dog? What was the reasoning behind attempting to sway everyone involved?" In this room, a profound silence enveloped the atmosphere. Even the council members, who had previously appeared doubtful, now cast their eyes toward Vince with a sense of intrigue. Councilman White finally addressed the issue concerning Max. "In accordance with departmental protocols, the policy states that only adults may adopt retired canines. However, Mrs. Parker has submitted a petition for this case. Max was chosen to be a therapy animal for her daughter, so he consulted the therapist. Is this appropriate?" She nodded. "Absolutely. The law allows exceptions for therapy and medical purposes. If you want Lily to heal, let her keep Max." White surveyed the room, then motioned to the other council members. Let's put it to a vote. Rachel squeezed Lily's hand tightly, while Neil wrapped a reassuring arm around her shoulders. Bennett placed his large hand gently on Max's head, and all eyes shifted to the council as they murmured quietly among themselves. The mayor announced that we have decided Max will stay with Lily Parker, who is certified as her caretaker. The evidence presented will be submitted to state investigators for a formal inquiry into Meridian Biotech and the therapy dog. The partners will commence right away. This meeting is now adjourned, and the room burst into commotion. Not with cheers but with tears, hugs, and quiet applause. Councilwoman Myers leaned down to Lily. Your mother would be proud and determined. Vince didn't linger for the crowd. He burst out, his composure finally shattered, with his security men following closely behind. Behind the cameras, a local reporter whispered, "Hero dog, hero, family." Lily held tightly to Max, the chaos and clamor dissolving into a serene stillness. With a sense of assurance swelling within her, they had accomplished it. She turned to Neil, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, yet, smiling. Rachel finally seemed to exhale after holding her breath for a year as they departed the council building. Bennett strolled alongside them, his smile weary yet genuine. "You did good, kid," he said. Lily was told it was real good. Max nudged his head against her leg, his tail wagging. Thumping hard outside, the clouds had scattered, allowing a streak of late sunlight to break through, painting the town square in gold, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lily no longer felt diminished or, for a fleeting moment, she felt an absence of voice, yet also a connection to something grand, and something valuable to stand up for. The storm clouds had parted, revealing Willow. The creek sparkled fresh and clear as sunlight bathed the courthouse steps where Lily and her family stood. As the final remnants of the crowd faded into the distance, a few left with tear-streaked cheeks, some still caught in the moment, shaking their heads in disbelief, while a few who smiled reminded us that sometimes, amidst all the noise and darkness, goodness prevails. With determination in her heart, Lily stood beside Max on the courthouse lawn, her hand gently resting in the coarse texture of his fur. The aged German shepherd lay in the sun, panting with his tongue lolling out, yet his eyes remained sharp, observing every movement around him. Duty still watching over his girl, Bennett sat close by on the curb, his hat pushed back and, with her eyes shut, Rachel absorbed the whispers of the wind, speaking softly with Councilwoman Myers as Neil moved restlessly, pacing back and forth. With the phone pressed to his ear, he coordinated the transfer of evidence to the state investigators. That had initiated everything in motion. The triumph when it arrived felt less like a parade and more like a soft descent, a burden gradually released, a discomfort subsiding. Yet, for Lily, something even more significant was awakening within her, the feeling that she could finally breathe as a line formed with folks, strangers, and neighbors all around. The town's doubtful sheriff approached to express his gratitude, while many leaned down to affectionately scratch Max's ears. Some pressed little notes into Lily's hand. "You're braver than you know," one read. "Your mom would be proud," it said. Another. Rachel kept stealing glances at Lily, her expression filled with a quiet wonder, as if she were witnessing her daughter in a new light for the very first time since. Hannah passed away later that afternoon, and Bennett drove them all home, the truck rattling down the road. Sun-dappled roads led them past the fields where Max once trained with Hannah, and for a fleeting moment, Lily thought she caught a glimpse. The outline of her mother in the distance, waving and smiling. The thought was both. With a keen awareness and a gentle touch, she blinked and grasped Max's collar, finding solace in his presence. The warmth enveloped the home. Everything seemed transformed, more vibrant and expansive, as if the very walls had been Neil and Rachel opened the windows to invite in the fresh air, while Bennett settled in, concerning the restoration of the ancient front gate, striking with a cadence that appeared to drive away the final traces of apprehension. The home brimming with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, freshly mown grass, and a hint of optimism. It wasn't long before the local paper reached out for an interview. Lily sat on the porch, Max resting at her feet while a photographer captured images and inquired about bravery, sorrow, and opportunities for renewal. With each question, Lily pressed her lips together, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. Yet Max, ever the supportive companion, nudged her hand gently with his nose, offering a moment of comfort amidst the tension of the reporter's inquiries. Delicate didn't push for phrases she crafted instead about a connection transcending words, about a girl who had lost her voice yet never her heart, and then almost without coming to terms with the fact that it unfolded on a radiant evening just a week later. The council's decision led Lily and Max to visit the local hospital, where they were invited by the councilwoman. In the children's wing, Lily observed as Max gently pushed open the door to a hospital room, revealing a boy who was only slightly older than herself sat with bandages on his arms, gaze fixed out the window. Max patted over, resting his head in them. The boy was startled at first, but then a small, genuine smile appeared on his face as Lily took a seat in the chair beside him, silent and trembling. The boy's mother expressed her gratitude to Lily, though he had not yet responded. No one had been spoken to since the accident, she whispered. Lily understood and reached out, letting the silence stretched, no pressure, just presence. Max shifted, laying his large. The boy sat still, his head resting gently in the boy's lap, the tail thumping softly as time drifted by, each minute stretching out like a lazy afternoon. Started to speak softly, first in a whisper, then posing a question about Max, followed by a discussion about the dogs he had recognized before. Something blossomed in Lily's heart, radiant and fresh. As she and Max departed that night, the hospital nurse intercepted them at the door. "You're making a bigger difference than you realize," she said. That night, Lily lay awake with Max curled beside her, her heart racing with possibility. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, phrases scrawled in the battered notebook. "Find the truth, trust Max. Don't allow them to instill fear, my dear girl." As the weeks unfolded, Lily and Max evolved into a. In Willow Creek, they made it a routine to visit the hospital weekly, moving softly through the corridors and providing a quiet presence. Comfort enveloped Rachel as she rediscovered her laughter, her eyes brightening once more. Meanwhile, Neil enjoyed his evenings on the porch alongside Lily. As she started to share her tales, they emerged in hesitant bursts before settling into a calm, steady rhythm, occasionally accompanied by the coolness of the surroundings. In the evenings, the entire family gathered in the backyard, where fireflies danced and winked among the grass, Bennett plucking the strings of a weathered guitar as Max rested at Lily's. The stillness of dawn, when an unexpected event unfolded that altered the course of everything. In the crispness of early fall, Lily and Max found themselves at the boundary of the field that once belonged to Hannah. As they trained, golden sunlight poured down, casting a warm glow as Rachel and Neil observed from a distance. Lily took a shaky breath, knelt down, and buried her face in Max's neck. She leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear as she softly murmured, "I missed you." The words emerged unfiltered, brimming with all she had kept within, grief, relief, hope. "Max." She nuzzled, her tail wagging, a soft, joyful whine escaping her throat as Rachel wept openly. In a flurry of excitement, Lily rushed forward, feeling Neil's arms envelop them both for the very first time. Experienced the embrace of family once more, not merely the individuals in the home, but the recollection of her mother, the bravery of Bennett, the warmth of unfamiliar faces transforming into companionship, a vivid and leisurely tapestry. Lily and Max darting through a tapestry of autumn leaves, making their way to the hospital, where they share moments of quiet reflection or bursts of laughter with the children. Rachel is guiding Lily in the art of making her mom's pancakes, while Neil lifts Lily into the air in the golden dusk, Bennett demonstrating the art of mending fences and planting seeds for the coming spring at the edge of The battered notebook, now worn soft from use, rested on Lily's nightstand, a reminder of what had been lost, yet more significantly, what had been discovered, often in the gentle glow of the moments before. In the quiet of sleep, Lily recalled her mother's voice, a gentle echo in her memory. Sometimes it only takes a single moment. Greater opportunity for a family, a dog, and the little girl discovering her voice. Once more, the world beyond Willow Creek would continue its course, just as it always had, brimming with fractured boundaries and difficult decisions. Yet within this little corner, affection had transformed everything. The tale unfolds, and should you find yourself wandering by, seek out the girl with the serene gaze and the courageous old dog by her side. Occasionally you'll catch a glimpse of them together, pausing briefly, as if attuned to an elusive sound, a whisper, a vow, a recollection transformed. Sometimes all it takes is just one more